Hi, my name's Christine. This is my brother, Stuart.
Hi there.
Welcome to episode 3 of Unmuzzled Conversations. Here we are starting to talk about 1960s. So from last time's episode, we were talking about the 1950s. So here we are now in the 1960s. So let's begin by talking about the fact of a major construction, and something that actually made a huge difference to Glasgow and Edinburgh was the fact that the M8 was constructed in 1965. So I just made a wee note that places like Pollokshaws, Kinning Park, Anderston, Cowcaddens were completely demolished.
Oh, good parts of them were, yeah.
To make way for the new M8 linking Glasgow to Edinburgh. And because it's one of the few, I understand from other people, it's one of the few motorways that actually goes right through the city.
Oh, right, okay.
You know, so that was a major thing. I'm wondering what kind of impact that would have had on businesses and things like that. I would imagine quite a bit. Well, plus all the men that would be employed to build it.
Mm-hmm. A huge amount of money brought into the city.
Yeah.
A huge amount of houses demolished, as you said.
Yeah.
What I remember though is I was just learning to drive in 1969, and the Kingston Bridge I don't think was long opened.
Right.
And it was just how quick you could get to Ibrox, for instance, where you could get to the south side. It made a huge difference. And then not that long after, they extended the M8 all the way to Greenock and Gourock.
Right.
So it was a fair for us, for Scotland. It was a big thing. You know?
Yeah, and nothing really major since then has happened that has made such a difference between the two vital cities.
No,
really.
Well, it also gave Edinburgh the greatest thing it's ever had. It's a big blue sign that says M8 Glasgow when you're in Edinburgh.
Yes. It's a very real kind thing to do for those Edinburgh people.
Yes.
So in the 1960s and 1970s, you'll know, Stuart, that 75% of homes had televisions now. Is that your recall?
Yes,
I'm trying to think.
I would just think everybody had a TV, but obviously there were people who didn't have them.
We had one when we lived in Petershill, because I remember there was quite a lot of families who didn't have one, and everybody came to see the TV. It was very small, but it seemed huge to us at that time to just sit up close as you could possibly do.
And we had the new channel. Before that, it was only BBC One. And then we had STV, which was number 3 in the dial. And there was a hardship. You had to go up, walk over,
no remote,
and move the dial.
You did.
Switch it on, wait for it to heat up. Heat up.
Yeah,
you could have made toast with the heat out the valves of it.
A 3-course meal.
So there's all that exercise involved with having a TV in those days.
No such thing as a remote control.
The
remote control were Wayne's. Wayne's were told, go up and change that.
Channel 3.
Hurry up, yeah. And I think STV was Channel 10. If I can remember properly.
They called it Channel 10, but in some TVs, the actual dial itself was 3, because it was 1 and 3 in ours.
It was 1 and 3, right?
1 and 3, but it was Channel 10. You're right.
Okay.
Channel 10.
So some of the popular TV shows carrying on in that real Western thing. I mean, it was a real Western fucking phenomenon.
Every night there was something. Every night.
What was it? I mean, was that all they made? They were all from America.
Well,
that must have been the thing in those days.
Well, they could make them cheaply. They made because they were made in Los Angeles. As the fucking backdrop was the same in fucking
Desert.
Rawhide and fucking Bonanza. Everything. You can say, I know that, Rock. But they were all cheap to make and on location.
So Rawhide was one of the most popular. That's from 1959 to 1965.
Clint Eastwood was in that.
And that was Clint Eastwood was in it. I think that was probably his first.
Nobody heard him before that.
He was
Nobody in the
young,
UK.
Wasn't he? Very young and thin and tall. But other programmes were The Avengers.
Right.
The Avengers. Thingamajig.
Was that Scottish thing?
Thingamajig, yeah, 1969. The Laird of Cowcaddens. Do you remember that, Stuart? They used to say that. One of the guys was called the Laird of Cowcaddens. Fucking who cares? But the other thing was Dr. Finley's Casebook.
That was quite good.
That was really
clever.
good.
That was quite good.
Z-Cars.
Never watched it, but it was a big deal. It was a big deal.
We watched it. My mum liked it. Dr. Kildare. Oh, yeah. He was a big heartthrob. Richard
and
Chamberlain.
What was he?
He was gay. So, and also, I didn't know this, Top of the Pops, Stuart.
64, I think it started.
Yeah, Top of the
remember.
Pops started
It was
in
a Wednesday. I can tell it was a Wednesday night.
Was
but
it?
it was on at the same time as Coronation Street. Conflict in the house.
Conflict,
No
yeah.
videos then, no video recorders.
Yeah.
Fucking rammies.
Aye,
so they
but,
changed it to a Thursday within about a year, I think.
Yeah.
When it was
There would have
fuck
been
all
no
else on.
contest. I mean, nothing could ever have competed with Coronation Street. There would have been, you just needed to just fucking suck it up. That would be it. So the other thing as well was that that children as well really enjoyed comics. Comics were quite a big thing then as well, weren't they, Stuart? I had the Jackie, and you had the Victor.
And the Hotspur.
The Hotspur. And another big famous one was the Beano.
I didn't get the Beano.
That was quite a big. Was that the one that came from Aberdeen or came from?
No, they all came from Dundee.
All came from Dundee.
Well, these kind of A3 ones, size like the Beano, the Dandy, and whatever other ones.
I mean, it was a very common thing. They were weekly, weren't they? Weekly publications. I loved it, and you looked forward to the day you could go and get them in the shops. And
remember,
stuff
you get pop ones, or you get later on you get what was that? You know, the kind of music ones, the pop star ones. No.
No, I don't remember.
I'm sure you did.
I'm sure you're probably right. I just remember getting the Jackie for a long time, and then it sort of stopped being made anymore. And but I sort of had that publication.
I'm just thinking something like Smash Hits or something. Did you get that?
Probably.
I just seem to recall you having it.
Absolutely, but I'm sure. So, but we were talking earlier on in one of the other podcasts about how the women didn't drink, and even in the 1960s. Women, I think maybe except for the ones that had come back from Spain, who come back with Bacardis.
Taste for wine,
I liked a bit of a sangria. They liked a bit of sangria.
And
they also loved Bacardis and Cokes.
Oh, aye, that was the Cuba Libres.
Right, that was a big thing.
Aye.
But a lot of them didn't drink alcohol still, and of course women still weren't really driving. I don't remember any women that would be driving in the 1960s. But women were known to have, at the New Year, a baby sham.
Or a wee sherry.
Or a sherry. Sometimes, my own personal favourite, an Advocat and lemonade. Do you remember that, Stuart? The big yellow... snowball. It was called a snowball.
Was it? Is that what it was called?
It was. So, because most of the women were actually still were housewives, even in the 60s, women weren't really working at all. So, what was Glasgow really like in the 60s? I think it was a very traditional setup, as I think it was for the most of the UK in terms of family life. Family life was a mum and a dad and a several children.
It was at its worst though, Christine, in the 60s. Glasgow was terrible in the 60s.
Yeah.
It was a total dump and it was very, very violent. And it wasn't until the early 70s they started to tidy the city up, and a huge difference. When you used to say, what do you call a tourist in Glasgow in the 60s? Lost.
Yeah, or dead.
There were no foreign accents. There was no English accents.
Yes.
And it really, I mean, I was a teenager then, so I remember it.
Yeah.
And it truly was a pretty terrible place to look at and to be in. And, you know, and for a young man, it was very, very dangerous.
I suppose for me, we were living in Colston at that time in the 60s, and in a kind of a wee pocket of a place where
we were out of the road.
We were kind of out of the road.
We were in the suburbs.
Although we had Springburn very near us, and you know there were areas of Springburn that maybe weren't the best, but really our day-to-day living was really a nice one because we had a nice house. And
we went holidays. Dad had a car.
We went holidays, and my dad had a car, and also we had a dog as well.
Bruce.
And we had Bruce McCormack, and Bruce was. I was thinking actually in those days that children and pets, and also hamsters were quite a big thing then, weren't they, Stuart? And you and I had guinea pigs.
I mean, guinea pigs were good. They were the easiest pets in the world to have.
Yeah, but you had to clean them. I didn't like cleaning them.
Yeah, but I had to clean them. But they were still easy wee things to look after.
And they made these nice wee noises.
And know what else you could do? You could. They had when they had their kits or pups, whatever we call them. Anyway, they're babies. They only had one or two, and they walked right. They were fully clothed. No, they had hair, and they could run about right away. The first day they could run about, so they weren't wee pink bald things. And you once they were a couple of months old, you could sell them back to the pet shops.
Oh really?
So they were popular wee things. It wasn't like, fuck, what am I going to do with this? fucking thing.
I think as well that a lot of people didn't have gardens then, so
No.
you know that kind of pet would have been probably more. It certainly was more practical and more possible to have a pet like that than it would be to have a dog, because houses were still quite small.
Well, we had a couple of, off and on, a couple of tortoises
who
always escaped. Where did they go? How did they get out? But they did.
But
and they all died as well. That's why they changed the law about tortoises, that you couldn't import them.
Yeah. I think as well that in those days, if you wanted a dog or even a cat, you went to the cat and dog home. There didn't seem to be another option. That I don't remember.
The
working class people
were big. You know, the options were basically costly, Christine.
Yeah. So for working class people, they would go to the cat and dog home, pay for the dog, and then you had to pay for a license, didn't you?
But I think it ended with
7 and 6.
So it was 7 and 6. But I think that ended at some point in the 60s, Christine. It didn't go any further than that.
Yeah. But I remember as well that the freedoms that dogs had then.
Well, latchkey dogs.
Latchkey dogs.
Yeah, let you go.
Fucking.
There you go.
And you never seen them for the whole day.
Come back at tea time. Well, there's our back. Oh, it's nice to see you back. Where the fuck have you been?
No leads, no nothing.
I mean, when our dog come back with a dead cat.
Oh, did it?
And it's myth.
Oh.
And I walked into the house, my mother was going mental.
Yeah.
And I was fucking waiting for the police to come. Fucking dog's got a cat. It just dropped it down. She couldn't touch it. And I don't know, I remember the guy that lived across from us, Jimmy Smith, the older guy. He must have seen the dog walking by with a cat. And he goes into the house and he says, Margaret, I saw you're Bruce with a dead cat. She goes, aye. He says, can I get it? He goes, fucking take it. And he says, what do you want it for? Put it under the rose bushes. They're great for roses.
Oh my God.
So he took it away for her and buried the evidence.
Oh my God, so it was solved.
Yeah.
So there was no kind of like competition. Everybody's dog was a stray, more or less. And
they were
everybody's
mongrels.
dog was
They're
a
all
mongrel,
mongrels.
wasn't it?
Right.
And I think we were really lucky. I remember being very young and Bruce was a kind of Labrador collie.
But he looked like a Labrador.
He looked like a Labrador.
He just
black,
looked like a
and he had a
white
a white kind of vest thing. And I remember dressed up as a nurse and, and bandaging him up, bandaging his ears and his paws, and he would just look to say, oh, fucking get her away from me. But he wouldn't say a word. He would just lie there and put up with it. He was so good.
But he hated the guinea pigs. He fucking hated them. And remember Dad made a wee run for them.
Oh, yeah.
and there's the mesh, so they couldn't get out.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get into them.
Yeah.
And he would be fucking glaring at them. And their wee noses would come up and like smell his nose, and he's fucking raging. You could see his body shaking. They bastards. I'm fucking killing myself.
And of course,
but he never did get to them.
Yeah. They made these wee constant
and
noises.
Would go boink, 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 and he whistled.
Right. Did they? Oh, did they? I don't remember.
And then they would whistle back at you.
Oh, God.
They were trained. I trained them.
So happy days, but there was no, having a dog wasn't a status symbol the way it could easily be today.
No.
There was no pedigrees, not in the working class people.
And I have to say, some of the very inappropriate names for dogs. There was a lot of dogs called Darky going about, and Blackie.
Blackie.
Darky. You get a
Slasher.
jail if you shout.
Oh, you get the jail these days, 100%. But a lot of Rover was quite a big name for dogs.
I think it was a few Bruces. Glenn was a big
name for dogs. And of course, Lassie, the dog, was on the telly all the time as well. So I was thinking as well that in those times, I seem to think that the roles of men and women were completely separate and didn't really overlap as the way they do now.
Yes.
And in fact, now there's more than a bloodline, I think. But in those days, even the kind of duties, if you like. I mean, I remember my dad always washing the dishes, but my mother bought the food, cooked the food, prepared the food, presented the food for us, and my dad would occasionally do the dishes, but he also would put the bins out. He also looked after the garden. So there was never a thing about...
That's just like my life.
I think I've just described you, actually.
Only I do the dishes all the time.
You do the dishes all the time. But the women, I think as well, because the women in the 60s not the women, but my mum anyway, also still didn't work. So she was at home. She was a fantastic baker, wasn't she, Stuart?
Wonderful.
She was a wonderful baker, and she was a very good cook for the plain things, for the nice wholesome,
which we liked,
which
and I've got to say, I still prefer that.
Absolutely, definitely. But I think running through everybody's lives in the 60s, or most people's lives in the 60s, whether you were Catholic or Protestant, was religion. I think
it was the respectable people by the religion, the respectable ones.
Because it seemed to be, for most people, that Sundays were set aside for worship, whether you were a Catholic or a Protestant. I think for us being Protestants, we seemed to get more out of it, because we had a Sunday school, we had Sunday school trips, where we would all, I think we paid a small amount of money and away we would go for the day.
It's about 3 and 6. You paid it up over the year.
You paid it up over the year, so... and off you would go and play games and be out in the sunshine and
usually it was
nice
to Troon
weather.
Or places like that. Go to the beach.
And also the church offered for some people badminton, the boys' brigade. They would have church fetes, the Life Boys.
There was women's guilds.
The women's guild. So I think that was also kind of part to create a kind of community, as well as not just a Sunday thing. I don't know if the Catholic Church had...
They had men's clubs.
Oh, really?
Maybe had women's clubs. And the thing about the...
What were the men's clubs for?
Well, I don't know, just for men getting together, because my pal Andy was in one up to quite recently. But I mean, there was a women's guild.
Oh, yeah.
But remember, the best story ever about the women's guild was about the Jewish guy. And his father was a bit of a waster. They were originally Lithuanians, but he was born in Scotland. He was born in the Gorbals. And he was a really, really clever guy, had a shit job, but he was studying, and somebody had said to him, if you do this one thing, you could get into Oxford. He couldn't believe it. But he did studied it, and he passed this entrance exam to Oxford, and he actually went, and he had a brilliant life. But remember, I was saying to you, he'd be in the house and be a women's... So even though his mother was Jewish, she joined the Church of Scotland Women's Guild, right? So there maybe about 8 of them in the house. They'd go about every week. And one week,
houses.
They'd be going to his house, right? So they're all sitting about, and they would discuss the topics of the day, right? And the topic of the day was, where was the best place to winter? As the Duchess of Argyll would say, Biarritz is a place. But the Duchess of Hamilton disagreed. She and her people said, no, Cannes, the Côte d'Azur. And a big fucking argument breaks out among the Women's Guild, who hadn't 2 pennies to rub together about who was right. And he said his mother would always say, no, I'm with Argyll. Biarritz has got to be the right place to go. He's
fucking ridiculous.
Absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that's so bizarre. It's got to be true. It's got to be true.
Of course, for us as well, Stuart, the arrival of the 1960s of the Gold Room came for us because we had an extra room. No, was that when you got married, Stuart? Gold Room?
No.
But
it might have been.
Because that was their bedroom up until that time. And you and I had a bedroom upstairs.
It might have been. So I'm sure you're right, Christine. Yeah.
When did you get married, Stuart?
I got married in 1972, and it was, you're right. That meant
so the Gold Room never came till the 70s.
That's right. It's worth throwing in now that you've opened the door.
Now that I've opened the door on it. So my mother decided to design a room that was once a bedroom, made it into what was a kind of a sitting room, really. It was a sitting room. No TV in it or anything like that. It was only for visitors. And there was a lock in the door. There's a lock in the door.
And the key was kept out.
The key was kept out. And also the golden sofas had big plastic things put over them to make sure there was no dirt on them. And there was golden
curtains.
Curtains and a golden rug at the front of the fire. And all of the pictures that were up had a golden coloured rim on them.
Gold frames.
And of course, the golden hostess trolley. There was a hostess trolley. Tell us about how she got in tow with this hostess trolley.
I think it was a picture, and something really popular, like the Daily Record or the Daily Express, and the late Queen was a photograph of her sitting with this hostess trolley full of coffees and who knows? I don't know who was even
posh things.
Aye, but I don't know who was visiting her, but somebody was visiting her, and nobody had ever seen a hostess trolley. And I said to Christine before, she should have got commissioned because these fucking things sold out within a month. Everybody in the UK who could afford one had a hostess trolley, including her mother, who got a gold one.
Gold one to match.
And they would be quite cheap. They must have been really cheap. But this was a big. She'd come in, ceremonially coming in, shoving the hostess trolley with the cakes and the coffees in it.
Yeah. I mean, I think as well that the thing that I remember from the 60s as well is the parties, the New Year parties. And I don't really remember there being parties for any other occasion. Not even for birthdays or anything like that. There would be very small family gatherings.
Things, nothing
small,
like that.
Maybe a wee cake.
This was virtually a formal thing.
It was. And
it had a time structure. Everybody came at the same time.
That's right.
And left more or less at the same time.
That's right. But the preparations that went on for the New Year party, which were normally on New Year's Day night, they weren't
Joan's one was on the night before.
Oh, was her in Hogmanay?
Aye. One of them was in Hogmanay.
Was that?
Uh-huh.
So it would either be in our house or it would be in our auntie's house, and it would start off 6 o'clock at night with a 3-course meal. 3-course meal, followed by as much booze as you could possibly
guzzle.
I'm still thinking, would there be women then who weren't really drinking or would just have a sherry? I think no. I think more women were more gin. I think was more of a
they would drink. They'd be drinking, but then I don't remember women. The women visit my mum. No, I don't remember them.
I don't ever remember women being drunk.
Or even the men. Very few of the men ever get drunk.
No.
But they obviously were. But a lot of them were hardened drinkers. People that could take any amount and look okay.
Yeah.
But I don't remember them just being cherry drinkers then. I think they were drinking like we would call proper drinks by then. But everybody was very calm. And
were people kind of at that point going to the Spain holiday thing then, Stuart? That's in the 60s.
Late 60s. It'd be late 60s. Most people were going abroad.
So people come back feeling quite, exotic. They were back and they're talking about sangria.
Would you like a wee daiquiri?
Oh, what the fuck are you talking about?
Is that orange stuff?
So the sherries were a way to fuck at that time, And of course, people did have the decanters in their houses, didn't they? They had these crystal decanters. Some of them were bought from Watt Brothers because that was the only place where you could buy
crystal.
10 bob. Aye.
But they looked great.
But they had like whiskey in them and some had sherry in them as well. Did any of them have port? Did my dad?
Quite port, and maybe even red wine. You could put. Well, I think that's what they wore. I was thinking more for red wine, but you could put anything in them.
But people didn't really drink wine then, though, did they? It was tended to be very much spirits and stuff like that. So, so after the 3-course meal, that was kind of felt that no matter what you drank, you would be fine because you'd lined your stomach with a 3-course meal. You'd be fine, and people did drive then, Stuart. I mean, people had cars.
They all drove.
And they all drove home, which is...
And amazingly, there was never any accidents.
Yeah.
And they never get caught.
Never. But that must have been going on all the time, though. I mean, that was only just in our house. That must have been going on all the time.
I remember what as a side of that, I remember working with guys when I was just an apprentice in the 60s, and guys in their 20s, young men, and they used to boast about how much they drank, and they had a crash, and run off the road, and they were fine. They just got up and left the car and went away home and come back the next day and got it. I've actually boasted about it. And you think, you want to do that now?
That went on for a long time, though, Stuart, before the drink and drive thing really became
before it's serious.
Yeah.
The breathalyzer fucked everybody up like that, because up until then, I don't know, you could maybe plead.
When did that come in, Stuart?
I would say maybe even the 60s, Christine.
Really?
The 70s certainly. I'm sure the breathalyzer was about in the 70s,
So I think life, certainly for me, was very, very uncomplicated and happy. I think I would be about 5 then, in the 5 or 6 in the 60s.
The turn of the 60s. Mm-hmm.
Aye, the turn of the 60s. So when did we move out to Coast? I think maybe I was
62
7.
Or something like that.
Yeah, 62.
Something like that. 61, 62.
Yeah, and that was a great time for us because we had a lovely house and we lived just in between Springburn and Bishopbriggs,
it's really
wasn't
more
it?
or less Bishopbriggs.
More
It
or
was
less.
100 metres from the border of Bishopbriggs.
Yeah.
So it's suburbia.
So life was good. We had a dog, and and my dad had a car, and we had able to have holidays and stuff. So life was really quite good for us. So the other thing I was going to mention was that with the arrival of television came the White Heather Club as well, and came Thingamajig. Now, so the White Heather Club was finally hosted by Andy Stewart.
That's right, yeah.
He was the final. He wasn't the beginning host, but he was finally the host of it. And of course, it brought to note people like Kenneth McKellar and Moira Anderson, because they were also quite
Callum
regulars.
Kennedy.
And Callum Kennedy. So that was Billy Quinlan would call them the shortbread brigade. But we loved that. And I mean,
I didn't like it, Christine.
You didn't like
No,
it,
I
but
didn't
my
like it,
mum
no.
loved it. And she loved the White Heather Club dancers.
The White Heather dancers.
And that was, and then there was Dixie Deans. And the Dixie Deans dancers as well.
Is that what they were called? Were they?
And
Okay.
the White Heather Club dancers as well.
Right.
And of course, Jimmy Shand. Jimmy Shand was in the White Heather Club too. Robin Hall and Jimmy McGregor. They were in that as well. So we did also enjoy a lot of Scottishness as well. I mean, that's probably the first kind of Scottish show, I think.
Probably was.
I think, did Bill Tennant not do something as well, Stuart? Did he not in the 60s?
He was a newsreader.
Yeah, did he not have a kind of Scottish show?
He might have done, Christina.
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't remember at all.
So but there was that as well. So you had that nice combination of rawhide, wagon train, bonanza.
There was Gunsmoke. There was tons
Gunsmoke.
and tons of them.
Yeah.
Ones
And I think that meant that for us, particularly for Christmas, the bow and arrows were a big, big thing, and the cowboy hats were a big, big thing, and for the wee girls, the cowgirl things. That just seemed to be a real thing. Seemed to be a real thing for us at that time. And also in the 60s came the Barbie doll. So for considering here we are with a brand new movie being made about Barbie after all these
60
years,
years.
that is when that came out. And I think that again there was more kind of traditional toys for Christmases and things for children, more things for boys and things for girls. So thank you very much for joining us today. It's been absolutely brilliant to have your company, and it's been great for us to talk about the 60s, because this is a time that we actually remember ourselves, so it's a bit more interesting for us. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
I'm just going to throw in the classic line from our mother in the 1960s. She hated the Beatles because they had long hair, and because I wanted to have long hair. And she came out with the classic, "See they Beatles, in 6 months you'll never have heard of them."
So there you go.
So there you go. She knew what she was talking about, eh? Right. See you later.
See you later.
We'll have
Bye-bye.
different clothes the next time. Bye now.
Bye.